For some of you, the Christmas season is your absolute favorite time of year. You love the songs, you love the decorations, you love the time that you get to spend with family, and you enjoy everything about it. Some of you look forward to listening to Christmas songs all year, and you've been preparing since July, and this is an absolutely delightful time for you. Others of you in the room, the Christmas season is not exactly the time that you enjoy because there's so many extra demands that are put upon you. You have to go to Christmas parties, you have to go to crowded malls and stores to buy things that you don't have money for and give people gifts that they don't really want anyway. Some of you, what makes it difficult isn't the stores or the shopping or all of the things you have to do, but it's the people you have to hang out with. You have to hang out with people at that time of year in close proximity, and for you it brings chaos and stress and difficulty because you do not have the kind of relationship with them, or some of those people are actually a little bit of a wild card, and they bring chaos to every situation, and you've already decided this year that you're not inviting so-and-so to come to your house on Christmas. Today, I want to talk about peace, but I don't want to talk about peace that comes to us in the circumstances. I don't want to talk about peace that is casual. I want to talk about peace that is profound. The kind of peace I want to talk about is internal peace that's more than the absence of conflict. It's the rest of mind and soul that flows from knowing that everything is in the capable hands of God that loves us. Do you have that kind of peace? Is that the kind of peace that just goes all over your soul, even in the midst of chaos and a difficult season? Open up your Bibles, if you will, to Isaiah chapter 26. Isaiah chapter 24 through 27 is sometimes called the Apocalypse of the Old Testament. It's a short passage that talks about the future. It talks about one day when King Jesus comes back, what he will provide. In fact, those of you that love the book of Revelation, quite a few of the words and the phrases that we see in Revelation actually come from this passage in Isaiah. It talks about stuff like there's going to be no more tears or crying, and death will not be anymore. And some of the stuff that we just hang on to and is so meaningful comes from this particular passage. Isaiah has a profound way of using language. He was so intelligent, he was so smart, and he had such a gift of words that he was able to minister to 4 major kings. He spent his time in the palace with the intellectual people and really had a profound way of challenging people to experience something that they really need. In Isaiah chapter 26, he talks about the day after King Jesus comes back. He talks about the day after he rules and reigns. He builds in chapter 7, he says that there's going to be a child that comes, and that child we are going to worship. That child is going to reign, and his kingdom is going to be forever. He's a wonderful counselor. He's a mighty God. He's the everlasting Father, and he is the Prince of Peace. But now he's going to talk about a song that all of us one day are going to get to be able to sing in Jerusalem, and it's going to be a cool moment. Watch this. In that day, in the day when King Jesus comes back, there will be a song sung in the land of Judah, and we will have a strong city. God makes salvations its walls and ramparts. Let me try to describe this to you. In 24 through 27, what happens is he's describing 2 cities. One city, which is about the people in this world, and they are doing everything they can on their own, and they're developing their own kingdom and their own power, and they're stepping over other people to get all the things they want. But there's another city where God's going to be in control of it, and this is the city that all of the world is working towards accomplishing. A lot of people are resisting it, but what's so fun about this to me is the Bible says no matter how you resist, you will not be able to stop it, because one day King Jesus is coming back. We have a strong city. God makes salvations its walls and ramparts. And what he does is he uses a metaphor to describe how God provides a city that is so safe because of what God did. Verse 2, open the gates. that the righteous nation may enter, and the nation that keeps faith. And he's saying it's going to have an open invitation to people who are willing to trust God in that incredible city. Oftentimes, we have favorite verses. Before we move too much further, I want you to think about your favorite verse. Some of you are new to the Bible, and some of you may be watching online and you don't have a favorite verse. Don't worry about it. But those of you that do, I want you to kind of think about it for just a second. This is one of my favorite verses, the next two verses. And for you, it might be if you think about what these words actually say. Isaiah says this, that God, in verse 3, you, that's God, will keep in perfect peace. Just think about this. God will keep you in perfect peace. And literally in the Hebrew, it says shalom, shalom. And shalom is the complete wholeness where the world is made right completely. And what he's saying is God is going to provide an atmosphere where you're going to be able to have perfect peace. But it's not just available in the future, it's also available to you and to me right now. God will keep you in perfect peace, but there's some requirements. There's things we have to do to be able to enjoy this peace. So the yellow is what God does, and the blue is our part of it, okay? God will keep in perfect peace those whose minds, one translation says, stayed on you, are steadfast, because they trust you. So there's something that we have to do with our mind. We have to focus our mind on some certain things. Verse 4, trust in the Lord forever, for the Lord himself is the rock eternal. So we can count on a rock, and don't think of a pebble or even a stone or even a massive boulder. I want you to think of a mountain that is such a massive rock that it's a foundation that can really stand when trials and difficulties come. God is the only foundation that will stand in the midst of the storm. It's kind of like an anchor when there's waves all around you, or it's a foundation, a place that you can hide in the midst of the chaos that you find ourselves in. You see, God promises peace, but he doesn't promise the absence of chaos. He doesn't promise the absence of difficulties. He doesn't tell us that we're not going to suffer. We are living in a broken world where there is chaos around us, and some of you are facing some difficult circumstances, and in your life, it is hard to be you right now. And what I want to talk about is God tells us that in the midst of all of that chaos, we can have peace, but there's two things that are absolutely required of us. I want to kind of give you my main points at the beginning, and then kind of show you how to actually carry it out so that you can do it. How do you experience peace in the midst of the struggles, in the midst of the chaos, in the midst of being forced to hang out with family members who bring all kinds of stress to your world? Keep your mind focused on the God who loves you. The first thing that we have to do is keep our mind focused on the God that loves us. And here's the hard part, okay? And I want you to know up front that what he asks us to do is really, really difficult. Trust God enough, watch this, to release the situation to the only one who can protect you and provide the solution that you desperately need. God wants us to fix our minds on his goodness, on his grace, on the fact that he loves you so much, and then he wants to trust us so much that we're willing to release the situation. And for some of you, you're like me and you like to be in control, right? None of you? I'm the only one in this room that likes to control my kids, or control the finances, or control the way life works, or control my parents. You see, we don't feel comfortable because we have to release. We have to allow someone much more capable than us to be in charge of all of the outcomes and the circumstances that we find ourselves facing. I love the rest of Isaiah, and I'm not going to torture you with too many verses, but I just cannot resist showing you how all of these pieces fit together. It says that he will keep you in perfect peace if your mind is stayed on him and you trust him because he's the eternal rock. And watch what he says. He, God, humbles those who dwell in the high. There's two different cities I told you in this whole motif. He lays the lofty city low. The city where people think they're in charge, he levels it to the ground, casts it down to the dust. Verse 6, feet, that's people like us, people who don't quite have everything the way we want it. Trample it down. We get to our feet, the people who've been oppressed and the people that are poor and the people that don't get everything they want, get to trample on the cities that people used on the backs of people who didn't really think that they were that important. There are two questions that will determine how much peace you get to experience. And right now, I want you to consider this. How big is your God? How important are you? Some of you have a super small God that isn't capable of accomplishing much at all. He's a God in heaven and he's worried about the economy. When you think about it, your God's sitting up there going, oh my goodness, look who just got elected president. You have a God that is so impotent and so powerless that he cannot control any of the outcomes and circumstances. Therefore, I must do it. And for some of you, the problem isn't that you don't have a powerful God. You don't think he cares about you. You think maybe he cares about other people and they're important, but I don't matter to God. You see, you will have peace in direct proportion to how big your God is and how much you think God actually cares about you. Do you have a big God that actually cares about you? I love this. The path of the righteous is level. God has a way of leveling out the playing field ultimately, but not always in the moment. The upright one, make the way of the righteous smooth. That's God. He makes it so that we have a way. Yes, Lord, walking in the way of your laws, we wait for you. In your name and renown are the desires of our hearts. And what he's saying is that when we have a relationship with God and we understand who he is and how kind and gracious he is, then we want to spend time experiencing that God. You see, oftentimes our problem is we do not know God the way that he is. We do not know that he has good plans because he cares about us and he is amazing and he is worthy of our time and our energy, and the things that we place our mind on don't really solve the things that we struggle with. Did you know that whatever you focus your mind on will not only determine your well-being, but it will cause you all kinds of anxiety if it's not on something that is stable, that will last? You see, what I wished I could do is I wished I could let you see God's heart. I wished I could give you a window into seeing a God that wants to spend time with you because he loves you and he's incredible and he is worthy of our devotion. We sang about it today. Watch this. Yes, Lord, walking in your ways. Verse 9, my soul, this is what Isaiah is saying, my soul yearns for you in the night. In the morning, my spirit longs for you. When your judgments come upon the earth, the people of the world will learn righteousness. We kind of have this dream, God, I just long for you to come into this world and to make such a dramatic change that our world completely changes. Here's the part, I'm just going to slow down a little bit. But when grace is shown to the wicked, and it's not any of you, I'm pretty sure it's not any of you guys here, but oftentimes when we get extended grace, according to these verses, it says, even in the land of uprightness, they go on doing evil and they do not regard the majesty of the Lord. Think about what it says for a second. Sometimes when people get extended grace, and the God of the universe gives them grace, they don't notice it for what it is, that it's God's favor to them who they do not deserve. And what they do is continue in what's happening. And some of you in this room, that's you. Some of you in this room think that you can do it all yourself and you don't need God or anyone else, and you can accomplish the outcomes and you can control the circumstances and you're in charge, and because God is extending you grace, you don't even see it. Sometimes that's scary to me, that the God of the universe extends grace to people who aren't even willing to see that they've been extended it. Lord, your hand is lifted high, but they do not see it. And when the hand is lifted high, it's a sign of power. And when God is about to act, let them see your zeal, and that's passion for your people. Let them see your passion for your people, and one day you are going to consume this world and cause things to be made right. I can't wait till the day that God comes down and levels out the entire playing field and makes everything right, and the people who think they're going to get away with stuff do not get away with it anymore. But the thing that scares me a little bit is even though grace is available, we don't always take advantage of it. We look at it like it's not that big a deal, and we just move past it. Lord, you establish peace for us. All that we have accomplished, you have done for us. Lord our God, other lords besides you have ruled over us, but your name alone we honor. They're all dead, and none of them are going to live, and all of them are not going to be remembered anymore. There's only one ruler that's going to last, and there's only one ruler that is worthy of following, and that person is King Jesus. We've been in a series talking to you about why should you consider following Jesus? And we started off by saying that it's because he cares about you. And then we talked about how he has power to deal with the stuff that matters. He has authority over life and death, and he leads you with your best interest in mind. Last week, Aaron talked about we can have hope because King Jesus is going to rule. And today, what I want you to know is that we can have peace because there is a king that not only cares about you, but has incredible power. One of my favorite quotes that helps me, and about 8 years ago I came across it, and there were some people suffering, and I was trying to give them a way through the suffering, and there were some really difficult circumstances, and this quote just really stuck with me. God gives us what we would have asked for if we knew everything he knows. And do you ever take a quote that somebody else made and then try to improve on it? None of you? Well, this is my best attempt to improve on Tim Keller, and some of you are going, you are crazy, because that guy is super smart. But here's the way I say it now. God often does what we would do if we had access to all the information he has. Just think about that for a second. God often does what we would do if we had access to all the information God has. And oftentimes what happens to us is we live in a hurting, broken world where things do not make sense. And we can't see all the pieces, and we come to the conclusion that God doesn't care about us, or he's not powerful enough to solve the problem, or he doesn't even have me in mind at all because my circumstances are not working out the way that I want. At 2 o'clock today, I get to spend time with an incredible family, and some of them are in this room right now. Because one of my best friends passed away, and we're doing a funeral for him this Wednesday. And he was a good person who followed Jesus wholeheartedly. And yet, a couple years ago, he had a stroke and then disintegrated to the place where he passed away this week. How is it possible that that happens? How is it possible that there is a God that loves us and cares about us and is powerful and allows incredibly bad, painful things to happen to good people? How is that possible? I just want you to consider that maybe God knows more than we do. Maybe there's something else that he is working towards. And ultimately what God is concerned about is the security and safety that we will have throughout eternity. And if we get to see the entire picture in mind, we can come to an entirely different conclusion because God loves us and he cares about us. And if we can fix our mind on God's goodness and the grace that he wants to extend, and the way that he wants to pull all the pieces together because we matter to him. I love how Isaiah has it in such a cool framework. You have enlarged the nation, Lord. And just in case we didn't catch that, you're the one that accomplished it. You have enlarged the nation. You have gained glory for yourself. You have extended all the borders. Lord, they came to you in their distress when you disciplined them. And I am not in any way saying that every time things don't work out, God is disciplining you. But what I'm saying is sometimes we get to experience chaos because of our own choices, and other times we need to be disciplined for our own behavior. And even when God in His grace disciplines people, this is what we do. We barely whisper a prayer. As a pregnant woman is about to give birth, rise and cries out in her pain, so were we in your presence, Lord. And what he's saying is that we think it's all about us. We think we're in charge of all the universe. And even when we mess up, we still can barely bring ourselves to the place where we say, okay, God, could you help me? Okay, God, could you work with me on this a little bit? God, could you help us to pull out the circumstances together? We were a child and we writhed in labor, but we gave birth to the wind. Those of you that are pregnant those of you that have been pregnant, there's quite a few women that have been pregnant, and some of the teenage boys, this isn't going to make any sense to you, so just hang on with me and we'll come back in a minute. But imagine being pregnant and being in labor for a really long time, and no matter how hard you try, you cannot bring anything about. But we gave birth to the wind. We have not brought salvation to the earth, and the people of the world have not come to life. We haven't accomplished God's purposes on this world. But you, God, the dead will live, and they're going to be resurrected, and God's able to conquer everything. Our self-reliance leads us to anxiety and unrest as we are constantly reminded of our own limitations and the unpredictability of life. Oftentimes, when we try to work things out on our own, we find out that we're not capable of solving things. We're not capable of providing the solutions that we really need. And what Isaiah says is that if we want to have peace in the midst of the chaos, in the midst of the storms, we're going to have to focus our attention on a good God that cares about us and trust Him enough to release the circumstances over to His control. It's interesting how Jesus says the very same thing. In John chapter 16, he says these words, "My peace I give you, and I've given you all this information so that you can have peace. But in this world, you will have trouble. Take heart. I have overcome the world." Paul says the very same kind of things in Philippians chapter 4, and we're going to read it in just a second. But if there's anyone that was ever alive that had every reason to be filled with anxiety and worry, it was Paul. At the moment he wrote these words we're about to read, he had people that hated him so badly that they had vowed that they would not eat or sleep until they killed him. At the moment he wrote this, he was in a prison floor, chained to a guard, awaiting execution. And that moment, if anyone had a reason to be stressed out and worried, it was Paul. Rejoice in the Lord. I say it again, rejoice. Let your gentleness be evident to all. The Lord is near. God is available. He's near. He is kind and gentle, and He cares about you. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And if you look at that word, do not be anxious, I want to talk to some Bible nerds like me for just a second. The word is marinaho, and the word anxiety comes from two words. Marizo, which means to tear, separate, or divide, and naho, which means the mind. When you put it together, it means a divided mind. Anxiety divides the mind and causes you and me to lose perspective. We no longer believe that God is capable of handling our circumstances. And what he says, that we can rejoice in the Lord. It is a mindset. It is a way of seeing the world. It's an intentional perspective that willingly chooses to see the goodness of God even when the circumstances do not seem to reflect the reality that we know will one day be permanent, and right now where God's in charge even though the circumstances don't seem it. Do not be anxious. It's an imperative command. It's a present imperfect that means that it's something we have to do. Is Paul like super insensitive or just ridiculous, or has he lost his mind? Or maybe, just maybe, he's showing us a way to have peace in the midst of the chaos. On November 11th, my daughter was 39 weeks pregnant, and she goes into the hospital. And when she goes into the doctor's appointment, her doctor looks at her and then takes her blood pressure and says, Grace, we need to get you to the hospital like as soon as we possibly can. We need to get you in the second we get a room available. He diagnosed her with what's called preeclampsia, and her blood pressure was really high, and they took some blood work from her, and her liver enzymes weren't working the way that they were supposed to, and it was kind of a super scary, dangerous situation. And as soon as the hospital got a room, she went to the hospital and she texted me, and my wife was already down there. And then I got on a plane, and then right after church, I went down there, and then they induced her. When they induced her, she had 24 hours of like mild contractions. And then she had 24 hours of really difficult, hard contractions. And my daughter was like a warrior, and she kept trying to have the baby, partially because she wanted it to be natural, and she's like me, she's super frugal, and she knew that she would have to pay $8,000 out of pocket if she didn't deliver the baby right there. She tried and she tried until she was so exhausted. The doctor said that your blood pressure's so low and the baby's not thriving, we're going to do a C-section and take this baby out right now. And at 9:10 p.m. on the 13th of November, she had this cool baby boy named Bennett Robert LeBlanc. That's her last name now. And we stayed till like 1 o'clock in the morning, and we were taking pictures, and everything was fun. But during the night, her husband somehow had contracted a virus in the hospital. And they sent him away and told him that he had to go to urgent care. And when he got to urgent care, he said, this is a super serious virus. You need to quarantine away from the baby and your wife for at least the next 3 days, but better if you could do it for 5 days. And then in the morning, they came and looked at the little fragile baby Bennett and decided that he needed to go into the NICU. And when he went to the NICU, the next 4 days were just really hard, okay? Her husband couldn't be there, and so my wife and I spent a lot of time in the hospital, and we were with them, and you see this little fragile baby. And have you ever had a helpless feeling? Have you ever felt like, man, I wished I could control the circumstances. I wished I could control the outcome. But I was absolutely helpless to do anything about it. My daughter didn't have her husband with her, and he has Kennedy's disease, which really means that he's going to die probably in his 40s, maybe in his 50s. And her greatest fear is that she's going to have to parent alone without the person she loves the most in this world. And she's stressed out, and it's really difficult, and it's hard for me, and it's hard for us, and we're wrestling with it. And I wished I could tell you I had perfect peace in every single moment. But eventually, as the days went on, and I realized that I couldn't control the circumstances, and I'd been immersed in Isaiah, and talking about the fruitlessness of pregnancy because you can't accomplish it on your own, and looking to the God that offers perfect peace, I started deciding to put it into practice. So I started saying, okay, God, this little fragile baby's in this case. My son-in-law's sick, and he was so sick he slept for 12 hours before he did anything else. My daughter is not doing well, and her blood pressure is so high and that her liver counts are still really stressful that I didn't know what to do except for give it a shot. And I started turning it over to God and saying, okay, God, I trust you. God, you control the circumstances, and I can't control it. I trust your goodness and your care. And guess what started to happen? I started to get peace that goes beyond understanding. I started to be able to experience the kind of peace that you cannot describe in words, and it's available to you and to me. Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, admirable, excellent, praiseworthy, think on these same things. Isn't it interesting that Isaiah says that we have to fix our mind on God and how much he loves us? And Paul says the very same thing, that if the only way that you can overcome anxiety and worry is to fix your mind on the kind of things that will give you a clear picture of who God is. Whatever you have learned and received or heard from me or seen in me, put into practice. And the God of peace, watch this, will be with you. Fortunately for us, both of them made an incredible turn. And I'm probably a little bit biased, but isn't that the coolest baby you've ever seen? But I want you to know that we live in a world that's broken and hurting and messed up, and the circumstances don't always work out the way we want. But we have a God that promises to be present with us through every single minute. We have a God that is capable and strong and powerful and will keep us secure throughout eternity. And we can trust him in all of the chaos we find ourselves in. And even in the midst of it, we can have peace. If we trust in the rock that is secure, he's the foundation that is solid, that we can trust all throughout eternity. As I close up the sermon, I want to ask you, do you have the kind of peace that's available to you? Do you have the kind of peace that is the rest of mind and soul, knowing that your situation is in the hands of somebody who's fully capable of working out everything? I'm going to pray for us, and then I'm going to ask you to consider coming up and either taking an ornament or a postcard. Did you know that we're surrounded by people who don't have the kind of peace that we have the privilege of having? We're surrounded by people that need to have peace, and I would encourage you, and if you don't want to, you don't have to. But I would ask you to consider that maybe there's somebody in the world that desperately needs the peace that only Jesus can bring. I'm not going to take an ornament because then I would have to make something. But I'm going to take a postcard so that I can hand it to him. Dear God, as we close out the service, I am so glad that you're gracious and kind. And God, forgive me when I become so preoccupied with myself that I don't even realize how good your grace is. God, help me not to be so self-reliant to where I am absolutely convinced I can control the outcomes.